Last summer, right after I finished my junior year of college, my girlfriend Nikki and I decided to take a camping trip with another couple, our friends Lisa and Jason. We were planning on staying for the weekend to just eat, drink, talk, and have fun. I'd been there multiple times in the past with not only my family as a kid, but my girlfriend and I had been there together too. Lisa and Jason were also very familiar with the area, so it wasn't going to be anything new for any of us. This gave us a chance to still enjoy our surroundings and appreciate nature, but we could also focus more on our time together and just enjoy each other's company. Once we arrived, we signed the logbook, and the ranger reminded us to stick to the marked paths and be mindful of the wildlife. We nodded in agreement and walked off. We were always respectful of the wildlife. Jason and I were not hunters, and even if we were, I think the girls would have taken us out if we tried anything. But as for the trails, sometimes we liked to push it to see things you are likely to miss if you stayed on the designated ones. After some walking, Nikki spotted an almost perfectly smooth and almost circular spot that she thought would be a good place to stop. I was hoping to go a little further into the woods, but I was outnumbered and we set up camp there. We all discussed if we would leave our tents there and continue to explore, or if we should pack up and set up again further along. After hiking and pitching tents, we worked up an appetite and settled into our hot meal. We brought a small cooler big enough to carry that held some brats and condiments to enjoy for the night. We sat around our small fire, enjoyed the slight breeze, and talked until we were too tired to continue. We went into our tents and settled in for the night until we drifted off. But the next day was when things started to get weird. I woke to switch sides, but I couldn't fall back asleep. It was probably around 5 or 6 in the morning. The sun was just starting to come up, but it was still pretty dark deep in the trees. As I lay there, trying to sleep just a little bit longer, I started hearing whispering. I couldn't make out what was being said, but I assumed it was Jason and Lisa trying not to wake us up. I could not fall back asleep, no matter what I did, so I decided to just get up and let Nikki sleep a little longer. But when I got out of the tent, Jason and Lisa were nowhere around, and their tent was still zipped up. I assumed that they were still asleep and that maybe I just heard the wind. I sat on the ground by our makeshift fire pit, now completely out, and rubbed my eyes, trying to get myself to wake up and focus. While I sat in silence staring out into the trees, that's when I realized that it was silent. We were in the woods. Being this early, there's usually crickets chirping or birds singing, or maybe even an owl hoot. But there was nothing. Not even the sound of wind blowing between the tree branches. I stayed seated and looked around the area, trying to see if I could spot anything. Was there a predator in the area? Was that why? Was there a bad storm coming in? But I saw and felt nothing. Everything looked normal. Then, I heard the whispering again. It was so faint that I almost missed it. I held still and tried to discern where it was coming from, but I could not pinpoint it. It was like it was circling me. How was that even possible? Once again, I couldn't make out what was being said, but I knew that it was whispering. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It actually sounded like a person whispering, but they were so fast that I couldn't make out the words. I called out, "Hello?" to see if there was someone nearby. Maybe they saw our tents and didn't want to disturb us. Maybe they were not all there, and that's why they were whispering in the first place. The whispering seemed to stop like it heard me, but then I heard tree branches breaking, like someone was walking over them. But just as soon as that started, the whispering started up again too. This had to be a person, right? They stopped like they heard me and then continued. So Where were they? And what were they doing? I stood up and started looking around more, and suddenly I started getting the feeling of being watched. You know when you're on your phone or computer and you can just feel someone watching you? So you look over and the little kid at the coffee shop is staring at your screen? Yeah, that feeling. Minus the annoyance, since I'm out in the woods. It's more paranoid than annoyed. I stood in place and looked around, trying to again determine where it was coming from. I walked towards the tree lines, but as I walked to the trees behind our tent openings, I started getting this sense of dread. Something told me to not go any further. But yet all I heard still was the whispering. I was honestly ready to get the hell out of that area. I went back to the tents to wake up Nikki, so we could at least start getting our stuff packed. We didn't normally set alarms for ourselves when we went out here, but we were typically pretty good at naturally waking up around this time. So, it was pretty weird to me that no one else had woken up yet. I went into our tent, woke up Nikki, and started picking everything else up. The whole time I was doing this, I could still hear the whispering. While she was in the tent changing, I felt a hefty blow of wind, and then like a switch, the birds and crickets started up. I assumed that Nikki saw the look on my face and asked me what was wrong. She looked at me perplexed as I explained what I had just experienced. She didn't hear any of the whispering, and said she also didn't notice anything strange with the birds or the crickets. Shortly after, I heard our friend's tent open, and Lisa came out, looking around. She asked where Jason was. I never saw him leave. I thought he was still in the tent. That meant that he had to be out of the tent prior to me leaving mine, and was out here the entire time, but where did he go? I thought maybe he went to relieve himself, so I just shouted for him and told Lisa to get dressed, so we could at least start getting ready to leave. As I broke down our tent, I heard someone walking and turned to see Jason coming out of the trees on my right. The look on his face made me think that he heard or saw something that didn't make sense either. He nodded at me, went to Lisa and said something to her, and then came over to me. He explained that he had woken up needing to use the bathroom, but while he was out there, he too heard the whispering. He thought someone may have just been screwing with him, so he started following it. He explained how it seemed to lead to nowhere, and that it didn't seem to be getting any louder or quieter. That's when he also started getting the feeling like he was being watched. That's what made him go back to our camp. He was feeling the fight or flight and wanted to get back to us to make sure that we were okay, and to get the hell out of there. I told him what I experienced and explained how Nikki didn't seem to hear the whispering either. None of us had any explanation as to what we did and didn't experience, but Jason and I had the sense that it wasn't good. We quickly left and moved on, much further into the woods. We found another place to stay in those same woods, to stay for the next night, and we all shared our experiences. And that's when we learned that Lisa had been awake since she heard me say hello. However, she also didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. No silence, and no whispering. So how was it that Jason and I were the only ones that heard it? And what was watching us that made us feel like we were in danger? I won't lie, it took me a while to finally fall asleep that night, and I woke up early again, but this time there was nothing off. I woke up to crickets, and there was no whispering. Same with Jason. We finished the rest of our trip with no further weird events, but it was burned into my memory. We had been there many times prior to that trip, and never experienced anything like that. We've also gone back since then, just Nikki and I for a day trip, and with the others, and still it hasn't happened again. Even though it freaked us the hell out, I'm glad that it didn't do anything to us, and that it didn't stick around. I 32, female. Absolutely loved visiting my great-great-grandma. I called her Granny, and she was my grandma's grandmother. She lived to be 99 years old and was just 6 months shy of turning 100. She was the sweetest little lady, and I would ride with my papa or grandma, or parents to go visit her to take her food, or just spend time. She had the smallest little house with the smallest couch and TV. Her stove and fridge were also tiny. She loved those dry and crunchy oatmeal cookies that have the crunchy icing on top of them. If you know, you know. But she would dip them in her coffee. Not relevant, but bringing her up just makes me want to paint a picture of who she was, just so you can understand how precious she was. She couldn't hear for crap, though, so when you pulled up to her house, you could hear her TV from the front yard. Most of her things were very old. She kept many knickknacks, but they all had a place and were very organized. She had a curio cabinet with backlighting and mirrors that displayed some really nice dolls. I played with Barbies, so I just thought Granny knew how to have a good time. I never asked her about them, though, but I remember she had names for them, and she took good care of them. I remember her referencing one of them by name and smiling and pointing. I thought it was kind of weird, but I was just like, whatever, she's old. When she got to be 99, I don't really remember her being sick or anything. She lived on her own till the very end and took care of herself. It's like her body just quit working and one day she was in hospice. I was about 15 years old, maybe, and I'd been reluctant to go see her and say my goodbyes. I was keeping busy with friends and activities, and I had my head held high and was acting tough and just telling people that I didn't want to see her like that. My dad picked me up and we were on our way home one night and he says, "Are you sure you don't want to go see her?" We just passed her house as he said that. She lived a mile away from us. The timing of that question and the sound of his voice made me reconsider. And I said yes. I want to go see her, while holding back tears. My dad whips the truck into a faster speed and takes me up to hospice until we're at the hospital. My entire side of the family is there. All of their eyes are wet. There's people in the hallway, doorway, and they all look at me with such despair that I felt ashamed that I was not there before. I walk in and the lighting is so dim, and many people are gathered around my granny saying prayers for her. I get there and the crowd opens up. I walk up to her and touched her body. She's not on a ventilator. I know now that they were waiting for her to pass. She looked so still and peaceful. What scared me was her feet, though. It looked like she didn't have control over them and they curved inward like they were lifeless. She was snuggled up in a blanket, and her glasses were off. Her hand was by her side, and I go to grab it, and I whisper, so quiet that I don't even know that anyone could hear me over their own crying, "I'm here. I love you, Granny." And I hold her hand for a few moments, until I hear her take one last deep breath. She was gone. I was shocked that she passed in my hands. It truly was heartbreaking to experience that. Some time passes, and we have the funeral, and honestly, it was a celebration of life, and probably one of the funnest funeral potlucks I've ever been to. It's like her youthfulness and fun-heartedness filled everyone in our family. My aunties had office chairs races in the hallway. We ate that potluck dinner and ate all the food we would get for her birthday. Fried chicken, baked beans, deviled eggs, sweet dinner rolls, potato salad, little smokies, cheesecake, pie. The weather that day was so sunny and beautiful and the perfect temperature. It was like we could forget how much we missed her because her spirit exuded enough joy in every part of our lives that day. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable and scary. Some of the adults start fighting over Granny's stuff and her house, and what should be done with it. I respected and loved her so much that I was disappointed with how they were treating each other and her things. I didn't know the whole situation, but basically I heard that some of the family held a garage sale and sold off all of her things and wanted to sell the house right away. While, for others, I think it was too soon and too hard. As an adult, now I can look back and recognize that everyone grieves differently. But when my mom asked me if I wanted anything, I knew that I wanted to stay out of it. After some days passed, though, I started thinking of her home and missing her, and I recalled a yellow pillow where the entire front was one giant rose. The ruffles in the square pillow spiraled into a flower shape, and I remember going over there and holding it. I asked my mom if there was any chance it might still be there. She said that no, it was probably sold in the garage sale. It sucked, but what could you do? But I think my mom reached out and asked if there was anything left. She came home with 4 stone dolls. They looked like they were lawn ornaments, but I had never seen them before. Each one was about a foot tall. One of them kind of resembled Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Yellow dress, brown hair updo. One blonde with the blue dress holding an umbrella, and a redhead wearing a pink dress. And the fourth was a blonde wearing a white/gray dress. Keep in mind, the entirety of them were like stone. They looked like they were young. Their faces resembled maybe 12 to 13-year-olds. They were somewhat realistic looking too. I frowned when my mom gave them to me with a "huh" kind of expression and said, "Thanks." They immediately creeped me out, and I was so frustrated that this is what I got to remember her by. Some dolls I have never seen before. They'd probably been outdoors and they were water damaged or sun-dried. In my very teenage way, I went to my room and shut the door and kind of stomped off. I hated looking at them. I hated them so much. I put all of them in my closet in the top shelf, but I turned their faces to the wall so I didn't have to look at them. I'm sure months went by, and from time to time, one of them would catch my eye. If I'd see the back of their dress and just get mad all over again, but I would try to ignore them. One night, I'm home alone. I'm an only child if you haven't gathered. And I think my parents went to dinner, or they were at work. It was pitch black outside. It was winter at this point, but no snow yet. I just got off work from my mall job, and I wanted to shower. We had 2 bathrooms, and I usually use the girls' bathroom, but because it was so cold in the house and I hadn't built a fire yet, I wanted to shower in my dad's bathroom because it was closer, cleaner, and honestly my favorite bathroom. I take a shower, maybe 15 minutes, but even with the hot water I get out because the cold air becomes just so intense that I can't take it anymore, as it hits my entire body. It feels like the outside air is right in the bathroom with me. So, in my towel before I could even wrap my hair, I run to my bedroom because I wanted to get warm and get dressed, and build that fire. It was so cold that I couldn't stand it, like shivering hard. Then, as I run the 3 feet from the bathroom to my bedroom, I open my door. But it was like I walked in on something and interrupted something that I shouldn't have been walking into. Before I can even react or register what's happening, my heart drops, and my stomach drops, and I scream. And at that point, I'm screaming my head off. Every hair on my body is standing up. I'm covered in goosebumps. What I'm seeing is each of the dolls, spaced out, away from the wall, and now facing me. They were still in the closets, and to the left I see my window blinds pressed down open like you do when you put your face up close, and use your finger to press a couple of the blinds down so you can see out. Except, when I walk over to it, it's up higher than my height, so it couldn't have been me, and I just forgot. It was about half a foot higher than my line of sight. I'm pretty short, so I noticed this right away. There's no comfortable way for me to have done this and forgotten. I didn't have any pets that could have gotten into it, and I was just in my room, and obviously everything was in its place. I'm so scared that I want to fall to the ground and cry, but I don't let myself. I try to stay quiet because what if I'm not alone? I frantically look in all directions of my room and see no one except for the stupid dolls. Clutching my towel, I go and smack my hand against the blind to get them closer. I have unexplainable and unexpected anger. I keep thinking, stupid dolls, I never wanted them in the first place. I hate them. I run to the kitchen where our washer and dryer are, and I grab clean clothes and throw them on to get dressed. I wrap my hair up, and I'm so annoyed because it's still so freaking cold. I rip open the cabinet where we keep the trash bags. I grab one and I stomp off to my bedroom. I'm fuming at this point, and I run up to these dolls and I start to feel like I might throw up, but I'm also scared to touch them, but also so annoyed that I'm having to deal with any of this. I grab them all and I throw them in the trash bag. I throw on my shoes, and wet hair and all, I run them out to the dumpster. I'm so freaked out, and the fear is unsettling as it's starting to set back in. I run back inside, I grab a knife from the kitchen, a big one, and I stomp around the house feeling mad and scared. And I yell, "I'm not afraid of you!" I walk through the house, turning on every light and making sure each room is cleared. I finally felt alone. And not in the scary way. I was used to being home alone. There's a difference. I tried to calm down. I start to build the fire, and I just sit there staring into the flames in front of the wood-burning stove, feeling the warmth. And I disassociate for probably a couple of hours. Almost like a sleepy/alert trance with a fleeting thought of what just happened. But I would let that thought pass me by like traffic because I didn't have any answers. My parents finally got home and I hugged my mom, and she could tell that I was upset. She tried to ask me what was wrong, but I knew that no one would believe me. I just told her I missed her and that I was tired. She helped me get something to eat and I was able to calm down completely. I slept with my door open that night. I never told my parents what happened. A few days or weeks go by and I had basically forgotten all about the whole night. Until I get home one night from work. I take my coat off and hit my light, and instantly my eyes locked eyes with the redhead doll in that pink dress. She was in my closet, facing me from that top shelf. I screamed, but this time both of my parents were home and they came in racing to me. I covered my face. "What's wrong?" they ask. I stutter out, "The dolls! Did you put them there?" They look confused and they were like, "No, what are you talking about?" I plead to my dad to please take them out of here. Without even asking, he runs to my closet and grabs them from there. But there's only the three. The redhead in pink, the blonde in the blue, and the blonde in the white/gray dress. What happened to the brunette one in the yellow dress, I thought. Was she the only one that wasn't evil? I tell my dad that I didn't care what he had to do but to just destroy them or break them, but I never wanted to see them again. For some reason, he didn't ask questions and he just did it. My mom looked so concerned and she said, "What's wrong? Tell me what's happening." I tear up and I tell her what happened. She said that she knew something was wrong but that she didn't know what. She didn't even really seem surprised. I tried to ask her where the dolls came from and why this was happening, and she said she didn't know. Then she hugged me and I finally stopped crying. My mom and I are indigenous women. Our people come from the Dakotas. She smudged the house and cleansed it with oil. I don't remember talking to my dad about it ever, but my mom did open up to me and let me know that she has also had some things like this happen. Not with the dolls, but sometimes with other things. She said she thought they were spirits, good and bad. She told me that I could just be sensitive to these things too. She brought up things that I could actually remember happening, but I didn't know that it had anything to do with spirits. There are a few stories, but I'll have to share them later as this one was quite long. I will just never understand how someone so good, like my granny, could have such mean dolls. I'm slowly moving in with my girlfriend, and a few nights ago, we were picking up items to take to her house. While going through things in the kitchen, I saw a noticeable shadow move on my basement stairs. For some context, my house, I've noticed, is on a dimensional rift. The space between dimensions is very thin, and I have previously caught glimpses of another house while upstairs. When I moved in, I had noticed a presence. It never felt uncomfortable or that the presence was malevolent, but while taking things outside, I became very aware of the feeling of being watched. My girlfriend asked me what was wrong, and I told her I saw something inside. She told me that she had seen it too. We both noticed a shadow in the window. She asked me how freaked out I was, and I told her not enough not to go back inside, since I had to use the bathroom. After getting inside, she stated that she noticed the presence, and as well as a second one. I sat on the couch while my girlfriend states that she wants to talk to it. Being raised to never mess with spirits, I was very apprehensive. She lit a candle and asked for them to make their presence known. I was getting anxious and was not prepared for the possibility of things in my house being tossed around, but that's not the kind of contact that proceeded to happen. I got this overwhelming surge of emotions and could make out the figure of a woman. I mentioned this to my girlfriend, who said that she could feel the spirit of a child. Suddenly, the flame on the candle starts to flicker, and I can make out the figure of a young girl, about 6, with puffed up cheeks trying to blow out the candle the same way you would blow out a birthday candle. Eventually, my girlfriend blows out the candle herself and comes and sits by me. I see the little girl's shoulder drop in disappointment, in an "aw man" fashion. My girlfriend begins to ask the spirit questions. She speculates that there was a tragic death, to which I am suddenly overwhelmed by a wave of grief that I know is not my own. She asks the spirit if she lost a child. Again, another wave of grief. She speculates that the spirits are from the Depression era. The word yes comes out of my mouth before I even have time to think about what is happening or what is being asked. She asked the spirit if she was married. Again, I say yes, but that he was no longer around. I get this conflicting feeling that she's sad her husband is not around, but also grateful. My girlfriend asks if he had hurt her. Again, I'm told yes. To which my girlfriend asks her, "Did he cause you to lose the baby?" I immediately start crying. My girlfriend asks her if she was Catholic, to which I hear the spirit laugh and say no. I speculate and ask if she was Protestant. She says no to that as well. My girlfriend asks if she was not religious, to which I'm told no, they are not. At this point, I'm overwhelmed, excited and yet feeling very calm. My girlfriend asks why she was there. I started to feel sad and conflicted. I'm getting that her baby that she lost is not like the little girl she has there with her. I ask her why she was there in my house. I feel a hand on my cheek and see her smile. She says, "For you." I look at her confused and ask what she means. She says, "You have no one watching over you." My girlfriend is now nervous because she's afraid that I may be opening myself up to a possession or being followed by the spirit. But I feel only calm and caring and peace from this spirit. My girlfriend tells her that she will keep me safe and not let anything happen to me. Again, I feel her hand on my face and see her smile. She says, "I know." I thank her for watching over me while I've lived in this house. She smiles and just nods. She then starts making her way towards my closet door. I see her daughter run up to her and take her hand. They then walk through a slip of light, and suddenly it all makes sense. I've seen their house before. I've had glimpses of a house that's not mine, but that is there. I felt her for a while after moving there, but I didn't always feel her. At that time, we decided that we needed to get home, but felt like it had been only a matter of minutes. However, when looking at our watches, we see that it's been over 2 hours. It's now after 4 a.m. My spirits had shown up in the witching hour. I would never have approached the spirit on my own. I was invigorated by the experience, however, and I will never forget talking to the mother from another dimension that has been watching over me. I wasn't much of a party. In fact, I consider myself an introvert. Nonetheless, I was invited to a party. I didn't want to go, but my girlfriends coerced me into it. I need to get out and meet people, they said. They promised me that they were going to be there and would stick with me. They said it was more like a small get-together anyways. Despite my better judgment, I agreed. I spent the next hour or so getting cleaned up and picking out the perfect top to go with my jeans. I finally decided on a light blue silk blouse. I donned the perfect pair of heels, and as ready as I would ever be, I headed out to my little truck. I set the GPS on my phone and headed off. After some trials and tribulations, I found the place. There were a few more cars than I expected, so I sat in the truck and watched. Not sure now about my decision. Even though I kept my circle of friends small, I did know most of the people that arrived after me. The crowd, however, was getting far too big for my comfort level, but I finally built up my nerve enough to head in. I got out of my truck and stood beside it, watching the going-ons inside the house through the picture window in the living room. I was just about to climb back into my truck and leave when Anne and Sue came running out the front door calling my name. They ran up one on each side of me, knowing exactly what I was about to do. They took me by the arms and started leading me to the front door. Initial greetings were stressful, but I made it through. As the evening went on, I was mixed with both feelings of anxiety, high and low. All in all, though, it was a fun evening. I was proud of myself for making it through. As the evening went on and people left, strangely enough, my anxiety got a little worse. No hiding in the crowd, I guess. During one of the harder spells, I decided it was time to say my goodbyes. I gave Anne and Sue a big kiss and hug and headed out to my truck. About halfway to my truck, I heard my name being called. I turned to see a guy named Randy running up to me. I had seen Randy around at school, passing him in the hallways and so forth, but I never officially met him until tonight. He was nothing special, but seemed like an okay guy. He had an average build. His brown hair was a bit too long and needed a wash. His brown eyes were kind of dull and lifeless. His complexion could use some work too. No, he was nothing special at all. I didn't want to appear rude, and anyway, he seemed harmless, so I stopped and let him catch up to me. He looked hot and sweaty and stuttered a little. Hi, Aaron. I was thinking that maybe we could go out sometimes. I was shocked, to say the least. I had never even talked to him, so I answered as politely as I could. No, Randy. I'm focusing on school, so I'm not into dating right now at all. It was his turn to look shocked. But we have a connection. When we saw each other in the hall, you stared at me. I had no idea as to what he was talking about, so I told him, I'm sorry, Randy, but I really don't know what you're talking about. I put my hand on his shoulder. You're a nice guy and all, but I'm simply not interested. I started to turn, and he grabbed my arm, preventing me from leaving. A red light started flashing through my mind. He blurted out, "But I have feelings for you. And I know you have feelings for me. I can see it in your eyes." I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. "Randy, stop. You're hurting me." "But, Karen, we are meant to be together. You know it," said Randy. I pulled and pulled, but he was far too strong. I started to scream, "Let go of me! Let go of me!" He only held on tighter and tried to grab my other arm. I managed to keep it away from his grasp and punched him in the face. Rage seemed to wash over his face. "We are meant to be together. You know it as much as I do. Now, you're coming with me." I tried to kick him, but only fell down. He didn't stop, but started dragging me toward his car. You will see, it's me and you forever." I started screaming at the top of my lungs. "Help! Help!" I was crying now with tears streaming down my face. I heard someone yell out, "Hey, leave her alone!" And the next thing I know, Anne was pounding on his back. He was pulling me across the gravel. It was cutting into my back. He kept pulling and shouting, "She loves me, and I love her." Through my tears, I saw that two more girls that I didn't know had joined into the fight. He now had his arms across his face trying to protect himself, but he kept right on pulling. She's mine. Leave us alone." "Stop, you're hurting her. If you love her, then stop," I heard one of the girls yell. "You effer, try this one on for size," I heard Anne yell as she then kicked him squarely in the jewels. He stumbled and then fell over. Now holding my hair, my head bounced off the curb and I saw stars. When I refocused, he was still holding on to me, but all three girls were kicking him relentlessly. It took what seemed like hours, but was probably only seconds when he finally released me. I rolled back onto the driveway and my back felt like it was on fire. My fear had now changed to anger, and maybe even rage. I jumped up and joined the fray, kicking him with all my might. He rolled onto his stomach and started to crawl away. The girls and I kept kicking and kicking as he dragged himself along the ground, yelling, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" He made it to his car and dragged himself up by the door handle. He managed to open the door despite the barrage of kicks. All three of us were now pounding him with our fists. He pulled himself into the car and managed to close the door. He started his car, put it in gear, and sped away. Now the girls were yelling, "Yeah, you better take off. We don't want your kind around here," as they started picking up rocks and throwing them at his car. The girls came up to me and started hugging me. That hurt my back terribly. Seeing me cringe, Anne pulled up my shirt, exposing my scraped raw back. "Girl, you're gonna need stitches. I'm taking you to the hospital." Despite my protests, the three girls loaded me into the car and drove me to the hospital. Amazingly, after one look at me, the intake girl sent me right in. The nurse came in, looked me over, and then left to get a camera. She took lots of pictures. Another nurse came in and started cleaning my back. After I was cleaned up, it wasn't that bad, however. 3 cuts had to be stitched up. The rest were gauzed and bandaged. They made me stay through the night, as I also had a concussion. The police arrived sometime during the excitement. Apparently, the hospital had called them after talking to my friends about what happened. They took all of our statements, took more pictures, and advised me that they were going to charge Randy and issue a restraining order. They also told me that I would have to go to court, which scared me. I had never been to court before. Other than those court dates, I never saw Randy again, and I guess he learned what happens when you mess with us girls. This took place in 2020 in Wadsworth, Illinois. There's a cemetery called Old St. Patrick's Cemetery, and behind there in the woods, it is known as Devil's Pool. It was rumored that they held satanic rituals back in the 80s and early 90s. and supposedly Bloody Mary is the name of the witch who was hung around the Civil War, to give a little background. So, one night, me and my friend Ivy decided we wanted to find where her house was in the woods behind the cemetery, and as we were getting ready to go back there, a group of teenage boys asked if they could join. We agreed, so it was me, 21 at the time, Ivy, 19, and I can't remember how old the boys were, but there were 5 of them. Anywho, we started walking into the woods, using our phones as flashlights. We were walking maybe about 100 feet from the back of the cemetery when I heard something say, "Turn back." Me being me, I was thinking maybe one of the guys said it to mess with us, so I said, "Hey, why did y'all say turn back?" They all said that they hadn't said it, and I just said, "Sure." I decided to take pictures so we could all look back at them, and we continued on. We got to these little trees, and there were 4 of them in a circle, with 666s spray painted on them. We were all laughing, saying, "Wow, how scary." I walked in the middle where the smaller tree was, and something was hanging in it, but I couldn't quite make out what was on there. Then, all of a sudden, I fell into the ground, and this small tree started falling on me. I started panicking, and one of the boys had to drag me out, and I was all like, what the hell was that at that point? I wanted to turn around, but they all still wanted to find this house, so we continued on. Then I noticed that we ended up back in the middle of these 4 trees. We were all freaking out at that point, because how did we end up back there? It didn't make any sense. So I decided to look on Google Maps to see how far we were from the cemetery, and my phone wouldn't work. It kept glitching and giving me this random address. I took a screenshot, so the guys and Ivy tried their phones, but their batteries drained, and one by one they died. So I said, screw this, we are not staying here, and I made all them go in front of me, and then something grabbed the back of my shirt and yanked me backwards, choking me. We were all panicking, and we all heard someone screaming in the distance. It wasn't like a person screaming, it was the most wretched thing I've ever heard. But I was trying not to freak out too much. I just knew that I needed to stay calm and get out of there. I then said out loud, "We don't mean you any harm, we just want to go home." And we then all started running. We finally made it back to the cemetery. I was bleeding and my shirt was ripped in the back. I kid you not, I had 3 deep cuts on my back. It looked like claw marks. We all went to the road and were talking about how messed up it all was. We looked back at all the pictures I took and they all came out blurry. You couldn't make anything out besides for this dark figure behind me. Me and Ivy went home and decided to go back in the daytime. We couldn't find the trees anymore, but we did end up finding the house. More like cottage, that was torn down. Only the basement level was left of it, and all around it was baby doll heads with symbols painted on them. It was creepy, and there were animal bones scattered everywhere. There were other encounters that happened there as well, but I'll have to share those another time. Many people probably won't believe me, but I can wholeheartedly tell you that I am telling the truth, that something or someone was there that night with us, and caused that crazy phenomenon. So, I feel that I should preface this by saying that I only ever dealt with the paranormal as a child, mainly in my room. I don't know if something had happened in my room before I lived there, but I do remember that I had multiple unsettling experiences. On this night, I remember going to sleep easily, but at some point I had gotten woken up to hearing a dull tapping from under my bed, which is surprising since I used to sleep like the dead. But somehow, when I had awoken, I felt that something was off. I wasn't fully aware and had assumed that I just woke myself up for no reason. Maybe the tap was in my dreams. As I started to drift back to sleep, I felt the slats supporting my mattress shift. I was surprised, but assumed it was my sister hiding under the bed trying to scare me. I wanted to get her back and started to slowly lean over the side. Wait, did I just hear a tap against the opposite side of my frame? Was my sister going to try to grab my leg from the small gap against the wall? I still played along and dipped over the edge of my bed. Huh? Where was Renee? Is she actually on the top bunk sleeping? My eyes started to adjust to the dark and I noticed feet. Right as I noticed the feet, I felt the bed dip behind me. I went rigid. I didn't dare move. I could tell that the bed was dipping on either side of my feet like someone's palms were pressing in. I'm wide awake now, and that's when I hear it. I can hear my sister softly snoring from above me. This isn't my sister. I should have known. There's no way she could have crawled up onto the bed from there. There's no breath either. I should be able to hear the thing hunched behind me, or at least hear it scratch the wall, right? How can it even be sitting like that? It can't be on its knees if I can see the feet. Bones just don't work like that. I don't know why 7-year-old me just accepted their fate. What was I gonna do? Run? I was basically upside down, as vulnerable as I could have been. The only thing I could think of was to reason with it. Shakily, I whispered out, "I get my bed and you get under the bed. I won't bother you if you stay there, okay?" I felt the weight shift again as I watched the calves come into view. At least, I think they were calves. I couldn't really tell what it was made of, but I averted my eyes because I really didn't want to see it look back at me. When I felt the weight leave my bed, I crawled back up until I was a pile of limbs and blankets in the middle of my bed. I felt comfort in knowing it wouldn't be able to touch me now. It was probably more of that I wouldn't be able to feel it through all the layers. I squeezed my eyes shut, just hoping I would wake up at any moment. That it would just be a dream within a dream. Well, I did wake up the next morning, relieved feeling that it was just a dream, even though I still made it a habit to leap into bed or tie my shoes from the floor so that I could see under my bed. Later that week, I made the mistake of telling my sister my dream, and she told me that a couple of nights ago she heard a tapping, and not on the bed frame. She heard something tapping the heater. She told me that when she looked to see what it was, she saw a hand. A thin, needle-like hand tapping the heater to almost mimic the sound of it heating up. Needless to say, I begged my sister for months to let me sleep on the top bunk, and eventually she let me. Over time, I sort of pushed the events to the back of my mind. It still sticks with me to this day. It just feels a little too real. But I feel that I made an agreement on that day, and I guess that ghost or entity was kind enough to respect my boundaries. I'm just glad that I don't live there anymore. Hello, Raven. This is my first time ever making a Reddit post, so please excuse any mistakes on my part. By the way, to anyone listening, my subreddit is r/TheRavensDream. I have always had paranormal encounters since childhood, and have always believed in the unseen. The earliest experience I can recall is when I was about 6 years old, during a storm when a flash of lightning filled my room, when I saw a small girl on my dresser looking back at me. However, that's not what I'm here to share. My first story takes place in the house that my mother currently lives in. When I turned 18, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to get out of my small Midwestern town and live in Hawaii for 2 years. By the time my living situation had fizzled out there, and I had no choice but to move back to my small hometown, my mother had moved into an old house on the east side of town, a house completely unknown to me. The house is currently around 115 years old and has sat solemnly there through the development of a larger part of the town. By the time the day in question occurred, I had experienced such things as hearing my name being called when no one was there, growls across the couch from me, hearing footsteps across the floor when I was home alone, and many other small paranormal experiences, and was well aware the house is haunted. It was my best friend's 23rd birthday. We'll call her C. And we had decided spur of the moment that we were going to point the car in a direction and see what we can see. Being from the Midwest and not having too many exciting places around, we decided that we would drive to Des Moines, Iowa, as there was many little thrift shops and good places to eat. We headed to my mom's house so I could get ready and pack a bag. I chose a black Nightmare Before Christmas t-shirt and a pair of blue jean shorts to wear. This will be relevant to the story. C sat in the living room watching TV and messing around on her phone waiting for me to be ready to go. From my perspective, I'm sitting there at my dresser straightening my hair listening to music, excited to finish up and hit the road. When all of a sudden C comes into my room pale as a sheet. I asked what was wrong. She just stated over and over to get my bags and other things together, and that she wasn't going to tell me what was wrong until we were the hell out of this house. Confused, I gathered my belongings and followed her out to her car. She began to tell me that she was scrolling on her phone when I walked by and stated in my own voice that I was going to get something out of her car. She looked over her phone long enough to see that I was wearing a white band t-shirt and black shorts. She stated she heard the front door open and close, even seeing the light flood the room as it does when a door is opened. She waited for a while, and when I did not come back in through the living room, she assumed I was smoking outside without her. After cussing me out under her breath for a little for not grabbing her as we always asked if the other wanted to smoke. When she went outside to join me, and didn't see me, she became confused, as the back door to my mom's house is fully blocked off with plastic, and always has been. When C came into my room and saw me there still, wearing a completely different outfit, she realized it was obviously not me she had seen and talked to. She was thoroughly creeped out, as I was. I mean, that thing used my voice. It's a story we tell often and are able to laugh about it now. I have so many other stories, including the time a spirit ripped me down the bed by my ankles in the same house. As I do believe I am a magnet for the paranormal, I will more than likely share that story and others sometime. Thank you for creating a space where people can share such stories. Much love. I've had a few paranormal experiences throughout my life, but this one terrified me. I was a teenager in 2010. I lived and still live in northern Wisconsin. Near the border of Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, down a quiet little road, lies the ruins of Summerwind Mansion. Official stories of the mansion only note how many times it burned down, and that there had been a strange murder there in the 1800s. There are reports that one of the owners had found a small corpse while remodeling, but that it disappeared as quickly as it was seen. The story I had always heard was that, in the early 1900s, a wealthy man lived in the mansion with his wife and daughter. For unknown reasons, the man killed his wife and daughter, put his daughter's body in one of the lit fireplaces, and then took his own life. Only a staircase and 2 tall chimneys stood in 2010. My friends all said that they had seen the little girl float from chimney to chimney. I did not at all believe in ghosts or anything of the sort. One sunny summer day, my friend and my boyfriend at the time decided to take a trip up to Summerwind. The vibes were great on the way up there. Good music, laughing, talking. When we got to Summerwind, nothing changed. We explored a bit, being the first time any of us had been there in the daylight. Eventually, we made our way under the remaining staircase. Being a skeptic and suffering from angry teenage angst, I went on a rant how I didn't believe in ghosts. I called the little girl ghost every name in the book, daring her to show herself. I also said that I would believe it when I see it. The vibes changed. I didn't know until later, but we were all feeling uneasy. The ride back to my house was nearly silent and uncomfortable. My friend was sleeping over. I had a futon bunk bed. She took the top bunk, I had the futon below. The uneasy feeling began to skyrocket steadily as we were trying to fall asleep. I remember we also went to bed unusually early, probably trying to get rid of our unease. Eventually, my heart was racing and I couldn't figure out why. Concerned, I told my friend what I was feeling. Her voice cracked as she said she was feeling the exact same way. Fear sank into me. I told her not to mess with me. She then started crying and said that she wasn't. I had been lying on my side facing the wall. At that moment, I rolled over, now looking away from the wall. I saw a small shadow figure standing in the middle of my room, with a bright light emitting from behind it. I felt paralyzed in fear, and I asked if she could see it. She gasped and sobbed as she said yes. My childhood home was no bigger than a trailer home. My parents were incredibly light sleepers. I screamed bloody murder for my mom, while the shadow figure stood still in the middle of my tiny room. With no response from my mom, I was now crying, ready to crawl out of my skin, overcome with dread. I jumped out of my bed and bolted to the light switch. I flicked it on and shakily said that I believed. I was so sorry for everything I said. I believe now. As soon as the light was on, the figure and other mysterious light vanished. The fear and dread immediately left my body. Wiping tears, I told my friend to tell it that she believed and that she would feel better. I still don't know why, but she refused to. She didn't sleep that night, or the next, at her own house. Since this event, I have never returned to Summerwind. Hi, Raven. Firstly, I've got to say that I love your podcast. I found it about a year ago when I was a delivery driver for a flower shop, and now I still binge listen while out driving. Thank you for giving people an outlet. I have a few stories of my own that I've been meaning to share. I came from a fairly normal family, however a few of us have a special gift. The ability to see people passed on from the other side. My mother, myself, and my younger brother in particular. My mom and me having the strongest ability to connect with spirits, and being highly intuitive. When I was young, around 5 years old, we lived in a small town that was surrounded by desert, and a few ghost towns. This town that I grew up in was also known for being quite haunted. My brother and I can recall being visited by a woman in an old-timey dress with red hair, pulled back into a bun sitting in the rocking chair of his nursery room. We believe this to be one of our ancestors, but have never had any confirmation. The house was never haunted, and when I think back to that time of my life, I get a strange feeling. Eerie yet comforting at the same time. Like it only confirms that this was our bloodline. In the same town, I had a friend who lived in an apartment building on Main Street. We would drive past this building every single day on our way to drop off the older kids at school. I would see the same old woman in the top window of this apartment building. She didn't look scary, just rather old and almost see-through, like how they portray ghosts in the movie. I told my mom about the woman, but being a child, I didn't think much of it. I honestly thought that she was just a cute old lady that lived there. I would even wave at her sometimes. One day, my mom and I went to this building to visit my friend. We asked the property manager if we could go to the top floor. To both of our surprise, he informed us that the top floor had been uninhabited and, quite frankly, structurally damaged for many years. I guess this was the first time my mom and I realized that I had this gift, the Shining. I don't know how long my mom has had the Shining, but she hasn't told me stories like this from her own childhood, but we lived with it together. Eventually, we moved to a new town in the same state, but that didn't change our experiences. My mother got very into family history, following bloodlines as far back as they could go, discovering old family legends, and more recently has even found 2 long-lost relatives that are still alive because of her obsession. When she first started getting into this, she would be visited by spirits in her room at night. At first, my father thought that she was having bad dreams. She would wake up in the middle of the night, staring into her closet and seeing whoever it was waking up my dad, saying, "Do you see that? Do you see that little boy standing there?" Terrifying my dad and my mom too at first, but it happened often enough for her to get used to it. Afterwards, she would jump on her computer and be able to find these people that she saw, whether by old photo or by matching the name to the feeling she got when she saw them. She felt like it was her calling, in a way, to help them pass on or something. That kind of trickled out over the years, and she didn't talk about it much, so as to not scare us kids. Meanwhile, just a floor below my parents', I had a visitation in my own room. I'll never forget this experience, as it was both equally terrifying and strangely comforting. I was 14 years old, and always a little rebellious. Earlier that week, a friend and I had planned to hang out after school and smoke weed. Still being pretty young and the first time for both of us, we had to plan this out. I walked over to her house, and we ended up asking her older brother to help us do it. Having no paper and no clue what we were even doing, we ripped out a page from an old Bible. I'm probably going to hell for that one, but it's kind of a fun story for a first time. Then, every night for the rest of that week, something odd happened in my room. I felt my feet being tugged as I was laying in bed. I chalked it up to it could have been my cat, but I would have known if my cat was up in my room. He was pretty vocal. And this didn't feel like paws kneading on the blanket. It was a tugging at my feet. One at a time, this sensation would go on for 3 nights in a row. Then on the 4th night, I was laying in my bed watching The Notebook, great movie by the way, on one of those 2000s box TVs that would go to static if you didn't have it set to any specific output. I had watched it all the way to the end right before the credits started rolling, and all of a sudden my TV turned to static and extremely loud, then to black. My room is in the basement, so at night, with the lights turned off, and no other light source, it was pitch black in there. This freaked me out considering all the other things that had happened that week. I felt like I was in trouble with God for smoking the devil's lettuce. I jumped up from my bed and quickly flipped on the light switch, only to find a huge handprint across my TV in dust. I started thinking back to the weird stuff that had been happening all week, and realized it wasn't just nothing. The static, the tugging on my feet, it all scared me enough. I tried to just go to bed and not think about it, because what else could I really do? Laying there struggling to fall asleep, I started getting a feeling that I wasn't alone. My eyes were almost forced open to see the figure of a man standing beside my bed. Like the first spirit I had seen, he was slightly transparent. He had a plaid shirt and jeans, short brown hair. He looked kind of young, maybe in his 20s. He stared at me. The expression he wore was one of concern. He wasn't angry, didn't speak, didn't do anything. He just stared. I stared back in complete and utter shock. It felt like forever, but It was probably only around 3 seconds or less that we made this connection. The only thing I could think in my head was, "Who are you? What's your name and who are you?" In my head, he answered, "Robert." And then he vanished. This scared the living hell out of me. I booked it upstairs to my little sister's room, and I swear that I didn't sleep in my own bed for weeks after that. I did tell my parents about seeing him, though. I asked my mom if we had anyone in our family history named Robert, and to my surprise, she said that we didn't. Over time, this just became a memory and another spooky story. Until one day, years later, I was telling the story to my dad, who acted like he didn't know about it. Though I remember telling him I saw a ghost in my room, and that's why I wouldn't sleep in there for a month. He said, "Robert? That could be your great uncle Bobby." My paternal grandmother's brother, who died at a young age due to impaired driving. This would have been in the 60s, which matched up to his attire and overall appearance. I had never even heard of this guy. No one in my family really knew him besides my grandma, because he died long before any of us were alive. But for some reason, it felt right. I told my dad about the pot and how I had smoked for the first time that same week. I believe that my great uncle Bobby visited me as a warning to what could happen if I kept on that path. That's why he looked so concerned. That's why he kept pulling at my feet. All of it made sense now years later. He was looking out for me. Thankfully, I haven't gotten into any incidents or near-death experiences. Unfortunately, however, even some years after this conversation with my dad, my older sister did die in a tragic accident where alcohol was involved. I think somehow spirits know what happens in the future and in the past. They don't live between the constructs of time that we do. But if that is the case, I wish my sister could have been the one visited instead of me. It's been 3 years since she passed, and I haven't been visited by her in person, but many times in dreams. My husband's grandfather died the same year as my sister. He was the last person to visit me from the other side 2 years ago. Like the others, he didn't say anything, he just stared at us. Quite contently, though, while we did yard work when his grandma was away to kind of surprise her when she got back. I didn't really know how to tell my husband that I just saw his dead grandpa watching us pull weeds, so I waited until after we had left, and then of course had to tell him all of my other stories. The ones that I just shared with you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm sorry that it was so long. It just made sense to share it all in one story. Thank you for your time, and for those of you out there, keep on shining. I have always enjoyed and even preferred hiking solo. You didn't have to stop for someone else or speed up for them. You could go at your own pace and truly have your own experience. But then I went on one of these hikes that now has me hesitating before I trust people. I had planned a small hiking trip somewhere that I hadn't been, in a smaller state park in Iowa. I was planning on getting through it within 2 days, and by the route I had planned out, it was doable. I was going to stop about halfway through, maybe even 2/3 of it, set up for the night, and then finish the next day. I usually kept my load pretty light with only the necessities. I brought along a sleeping bag and a hammock, hoping to find a nice set of trees. The hammock was my favorite way to sleep, getting to gaze at the stars until I drifted off. I arrived on Friday afternoon in late July. As I was doing one last check on my supplies and adjusting the tightness on my boots, a man approached me wearing the normal ranger uniform you might expect. He was probably about mid-40s, wearing khakis and a dark green shirt with a matching hat, and a small scarf tied around his neck. He also had a badge pinned to his shirt that said Chuck. He had some stubble on his chin and either had really short hair or was bald, because I couldn't see any with his hat on. He nodded and asked me if it was my first time here, and I confirmed. He seemed to be thrilled by this, and began asking me questions about what I was looking for or hoped to get out of the trip. I explained that I was just doing some hiking alone, and just wanted to see what all the park had to offer. Chuck was very clearly passionate about his job. He immediately pointed out some of the best trails to take, and even some of the off-the-path ones to get some of the best scenic views. Before I knew it, he was walking alongside me, and we were chatting about different parks and forests we'd visited in the past. We had been walking and chatting for a good portion of the trail, until I decided to take a trail that had a steep incline. Chuck had pointed it out to me, and suggested that I check it out, then said he had to stay near the base. I thanked him, and we parted ways. I took the trail and quickly understood why it was rarely taken. The trail started as just dirt and grass, but the higher I went, the more it turned to loose rock and dirt, which became a bit more hard to walk on. But the view at the end was absolutely worth it. There was a small ledge that overlooked the lake, and the reflection on the water was just breathtaking. I stood there taking it all in for several minutes before I finally walked away. I then walked back down the trail and continued on my path until I could tell that I needed to rest. The sun was starting to set, so I decided to stop and set up for the night. After walking around the trees, I finally found a set and tied up my hammock. As I lay there staring up at the trees and sky, I started thinking about all I had seen that day. I thought about the view on the inclined trail, and it made me want to see the same with the moon. I wanted to get that contrasting view of day versus night. It wasn't going to be the exact same view because I would have to walk back quite a bit, but I knew if I walked a little to the west, I would find the lake again, and get to see a similar view. I kept my bag and hammock where it was, and just took my camera and headlamp with me. I walked through the trees, and the chill in the air confirmed that I was getting close. But I was apparently not alone in my thoughts. As I got closer, I saw someone standing near the edge of the lake. But as soon as I saw the scarf around the neck, I knew it was Chuck. He had his back to me, arms to his side, staring out at the lake. His shirt was unbuttoned and waving in the slight breeze. I didn't want to startle him, so I just called out to him. "Hey, Chuck, you were right about that view." Chuck did not move. He didn't even budge or turn around when I spoke. I thought maybe he didn't hear me. Maybe he had bad hearing or possibly even had earbuds in that I couldn't see. If so, I still did not want to startle him, so I thought I would make a wide circle around him until I was within his view to spot me. As I started walking to his left, I noticed Chuck finally start moving. But all he turned was his head. Something was off about the way he moved. His head slowly turned to the left, but he kept turning it almost unnaturally. It was like he was really struggling to turn it when it wouldn't turn anymore. Like you're trying to look at something behind you that's just out of view. And once his head was turned as far as it could, he then slowly moved his torso to match the direction of his head. But again, it was just his torso. His legs stayed in an A form while his torso now slowly moved. It was uncanny and unnatural and just creepy. Why didn't he just move his whole body to look behind him? I stopped in place as I watched him turn like that, and then he leaned his head to the side and stayed in that position for several seconds. He was really freaking me out, and I was about to back away back to my camp when he finally spoke. He flashed a very wide grin that looked nothing like the friendly smile I got at the entrance, and then he said in a mimicking tone, "Hey Chuck, you were right about the view." He literally just repeated what I said. It was definitely his voice, but he just repeated me. Why? Why would he just repeat what I was saying? Why was he being so creepy, and what was he even doing out here in this exact spot? Something was not right, and I was not about to stick around to find out. So I made a mad dash back to my stuff, looking back every once in a while to make sure he wasn't following me. I didn't really sleep that night either. I was too paranoid that he would come find me. I don't know if he would have done anything, but he was already being creepy, so I wasn't going to take my chances. It was also way too dark in those woods, and I didn't think it would be any safer to walk around with all my stuff, so I just stayed where I was. The next morning, I finished the rest of the trek without any run-ins with Chuck. I unfortunately didn't get to enjoy most of it because I was looking around for him, so I'm glad that I got to experience what I did the day leading up to that night. When I got to the entrance, I thought about finding another ranger and telling them about it, but I was also worried about how they would take it. Yeah, one of your rangers was in the woods turning weird and copying what I said. It's not like he physically did anything, so what could they even do? I just decided to keep it to myself and left. And I haven't returned to that park again. I've told some people I'm close to and posted this in other places, and the consensus is that he was probably just trying to mess with me, or maybe there was something messed up with him upstairs. Either way, it left a lasting impression on me, one that I don't care for, and once again, has confirmed that I would rather do these things solo. But maybe a camcorder or a GoPro wouldn't be such a bad idea to take with me. Been listening to the stories, and I just wanted to say that I love them very much. I usually listen to them as I work, and it's been helping with focus. Well, happy to be of service. As for my story, I've always had an inkling that stuff is attracted to me, or that I sort of attract stuff. The unknown and strange has always piqued my interest, so a part of me is always looking for it. On to the story. When I was younger, around 10 to 13 years old, strange things were frequently happening around me. I'm not sure if it was a specific entity that likes to follow me around, or that I was just more sensitive to the paranormal at the time, but those were truly strange times. My stuff would disappear and then reappear in places that I have searched. That feeling of being watched, shadows dancing at your peripheral, things just straight up moving without prior intervention. The most notable of these events happened around other people, part of which I think it was something following me. I had two friends that I would regularly hang out with at school, and they were the other people that saw it. One time was in the restrooms. Cliché, I know. Being young and dumb, we were scaring each other by turning the lights on and off, and making weird noises ranging from shrill singing to bird noises. So, here we are, me and my friend laughing our back ends off, and in front of us is those big mirrors you typically see in public restrooms. I was mid-joke, probably making an impression of whatever cartoon show we were watching at the time, when my friend screams, points, and runs out. To note, the lights were off at this time, and I was just confused. I thought they were messing with me, thinking that I walk out pointing at them, chuckling at their attempt to scare me. When I catch up to them, they were outside the hallway white as a sheet. I jest and ask them, was the ghost scary? And she asks me if I did not see the thing. I think the room was dark, so stuff was pretty blurry. Then I remember. As I was walking out, the wall behind me had a weird shadow cast on it. With how the room is put together, sunlight still went in the part where the big mirror was, so that shadow that stretched throughout the space behind me was just impossible. The other incident involved two of my friends, same one from the restroom. I was walking down the stairs and they ran down, leaving me at the steps. At the end of the stairs, there's this big bulletin board inside an acrylic case, so it reflected light. At their angle, the staircase was visible as a reflection. So was I. And another figure behind me. They described it as this big, tall, blurry thing just behind me. Thinking that a teacher was going to find us hanging around after class, they turned to face the staircase, only to find me at the stairs walking down still. We left after that. They did ask if I saw someone, which I did not. We still talk about these stories from time to time, and so far it's been consistent throughout the years, so they definitely remember. I would tell more, but just typing these out creeps me out. Like there's someone just looking over my shoulder type of creepy. Stuff does still happen to me, although incidents definitely have lessened, so perhaps I'm not that intuitive about them anymore. Can't say that they've mellowed out, though. Just a heads up, this story does need a content warning as it does contain a predator of that kind. The story is about 11 minutes and 54 seconds long, so after this warning, if you do not wish to listen to this type of content, this specific topic, skip around 12 minutes. Hello, Raven. I enjoy your channel, and I wish to share with you a true disturbing story that happened to me when I was a kid. This story involves a minor and an adult, and has adult sexual situations in it that may not be suitable for all people. So, please skip this story, folks, if this stuff bothers you. And thank you. My name is Sasha. I'm a Jewish lady who was born in Brooklyn, New York, Brighton Beach. The largest Russian-American communities in New York City are located in Brighton Beach and Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. Brighton Beach is also nicknamed Little Odessa and Little Russia due to its population of Russian-speaking immigrants from the Soviet Union. Many Russian Jewish people immigrated to Brighton Beach, especially. The Atlantic Ocean nearby reminded them of the Black Sea. My mother came to America for a better life from the Soviet Union and became a schoolteacher, got married, and had a child called Sasha, which is me. I loved living in Brighton Beach. It's a neighborhood located in southern Brooklyn, and it's famous for its seaside location, iconic boardwalk, and bustling nightlife. One of the most popular attractions in Brighton Beach is the New York Aquarium, which provides visitors to witness the exotic marine life from around the world. I also love going to Brooklyn, New York's Coney Island Beach, and amusement parks too. In both places, my friends and I love to eat the pizza, french fries, ice cream, and other yummy things to eat, along with the attractions. My girlfriend Olga and I even found an old gun in the Coney Island weeds once. I was 12 years old in 2011, and school was out for the summer. So, my mother and I planned to go to Brighton Beach together. My father had to work that day. I did not know then that this was to be the beginning of a nightmare for me. When my mom and I got to the beach, we set our blankets down. As soon as we did, my mom told me that she had to go to the bathroom. I told her I would wait for her on the beach since it was so close to the bathrooms. This was a mistake, thinking back about this now. I was not thinking about stranger danger too much back then. It was almost like clockwork, like his eyes were on me as soon as I hit the beach, because once my mom set off for the bathroom and I was looking in the beach blanket for the suntanning oil, I saw a stranger hover right above me. The stranger asked me if I wanted any company. I looked up at him as I shielded my eyes from the sun and noticed he was a handsome African-American man with a black mustache at 6 foot tall in height. The stranger was around 25 years old. He must have worked out with weights because he had a professional bodybuilder's physique, and reminded me of Ronnie Coleman, who won Mr. Olympia a multitude of times. The man was bulging with muscles from head to toe, and was quite a sight to behold. And even more so because I was only a little girl at the time. The man asked me again if I would like any company, but before I could answer, he gently took the suntanning lotion from my hands and sat right next to me as he started to tan my body with the lotion. The suntanning lotion made my whole body tingle as he introduced himself as Jimmy. As I then introduced myself as Sasha, I then told Jimmy that my mom would be returning from the bathroom shortly. As soon as I said this, he had a worried look come across his face. Jimmy then told me that he had to leave soon, but made arrangements to meet up the next day at 1 in the afternoon. But wait, Jimmy, what'll I tell my mom? I asked him worriedly. Jimmy just smiled and looked at me. Just tell her you're with one of your girlfriends on the beach, he responded. She won't know what's really going on, he continued. Boy, was I young and naive little girl back then. I was falling for this enormously built, bodybuilding adult man who was way too old for me to be seeing him to begin with. But Jimmy was so charming and sweet, and I ignored all this. Jimmy then looked at me. I can see that you enjoy looking at my muscles, he said, smiling as I nodded my head in agreement. Well, how about this, Sasha honey? He said as he flexed a big round bicep muscle for me. Wow, Jimmy, that's big, I exclaimed excitedly, as Jimmy then squeezed harder as his round bicep soared into an enormous mountain peak in size. As soon as he did this, Jimmy allowed me to feel his flexed bicep, which, I must admit, I enjoyed. Jimmy then surprised me as he got closer to me sitting on the blanket, as he put his left brawny arm around me and kissed me lightly on the lips. This made me shiver with excitement. I'd been kissed before by guys, but never by a muscle-bound He-Man like this. Being the silly and naive girl I was, I got lost in the moment. As I lay my back on the blanket and put both hands on the back of my head, as I pursed my lips waiting for another kiss, which was longer this time. Jimmy then asked me, "How was that?" But before I could answer, I saw him dart away. I then looked back and I could see my mom coming. Thank goodness she did not see all this, or there would have been hell to pay. My mom did not only go to the bathroom, but got us some chicken to eat and soda to drink. I was a pretty good actress and pretended nothing had happened when she was gone. But looking back, I was just hurting myself in the long run, not telling her about this pedo man hitting on me. The next day I showed up at the beach at the time Jimmy had set for us, and lo and behold, I saw him waiting on the beach for me. I sat down close to him on the beach blanket as he put his left arm around me. I giggled as I waited for my kiss to come. I looked down to see that Jimmy was excited, because his swimming trunks were much too small for him. After the kiss, Jimmy then raised my face gently to his as we looked into each other's eyes. I like you, Sasha. Do you like me? He said as I nodded my head happily. Do you want to leave the beach and have some more fun with me? He asked. We could go to a nearby hotel together and enjoy our time. You do know what that is, and how to do it, right? Jimmy asked, smiling. I foolishly nodded my head to everything that Jimmy was saying to me. I'd had a few boyfriends who kissed me, but had never gone all the way yet. You see, honey, once I saw your face, hair, and body, I knew I had to have you for my own, he continued, smiling. I was thinking to myself that I did hit puberty early. My chest was large for my age, and I was curvaceous, and I looked about 18 years old even though I was still 12. Many boys my age were attracted to me, and apparently older guys like Jimmy were also. I looked at Jimmy and tried to return his smile. This all sounded exciting, but I didn't know if I was ready for romance with an adult male, and it was against the law to boot, I thought to myself. Jimmy was looking at me smiling, but this time I could see that it was a fake smile. He just wanted to have his way with me in bed and probably throw me away like an old pair of shoes. Nor, even worse, kill me. Some pedos do kill children. I thought this to myself with a shiver. How could I not see his true intentions before? I then thought fast to myself. I could see now that Jimmy was just a wolf in sheep's clothing, trying to take advantage of a young, minor girl, who he thought didn't know any better until it was too late. But it wasn't too late for me yet, as I then told Jimmy I would get a hotel room at Blue Sky Guest House. As I said before, I looked older and I told Jimmy that I could get a room there and be in bed when he arrived. I told Jimmy to meet me in room 12 at 6 o'clock sharp tomorrow and I would be waiting at the hotel. A big smile crossed Jimmy's face as he agreed. He then kissed me and left. This last kiss from Jimmy left me with a cold and sour aftertaste because I knew now what a snake in the grass he really was. The next day, at 6 o'clock sharp, I peeked out the window of the hotel room and I saw Jimmy walking up briskly to the hotel. When he got to the door and knocked, I told him the door was open. This hotel had a few rooms, and I told Jimmy I was in the bedroom waiting for him. Jimmy called out to me to hold on a second as he got ready. I was peeking through a closet in the bedroom hiding when I saw Jimmy come in, naked and ready. Just as I thought, Jimmy was hot and ready. Not only was he ready, but I could also smell the liquor on his breath. He'd had a lot of alcohol to drink and was really liquored up for this. Probably just thinking he was going to have his way with me, and not caring at all what I thought. But I had a huge surprise waiting for him. As soon as Jimmy entered the bedroom, I had my Russian friends from my neighborhood, Ivan, Boris, Dmitri, and Vladimir, waiting for him, with brass knuckles and baseball bats, as they soon beat Jimmy to a mess. These Russian mafia members were all young and tough as nails. They did not like predators, and they wanted them out of their neighborhood. I asked them to not kill Jimmy, but to beat him up pretty badly. Jimmy got the point, and he left my neighborhood, badly beaten, but still alive. I was greatly relieved that I had escaped with my own life. Who would have known what would have happened alone with this massive man? My friends from the neighborhood saved my bacon, and I was forever grateful to them. You see, we decided to handle this pedo problem ourselves, and not call the police. Some would say this was small-town justice. Although I escaped this pedo's wrath, I did not escape my mother's wrath. My mom gave me a strong lecture on predators, which I took to heart. I tell you that I was one lucky girl to escape this pedo, knowing that some children were not so lucky. I just hope that I never see the likes of Jimmy ever again. Hello, Raven. I found your podcast on Spotify and usually listen while I'm at work, and also sometimes to go to sleep at night. Thank you. I know that I put that this is paranormal. However, in my mind, this was not scary in any way, and all I felt while going through this was love. So, here I go. I'm a 44-year-old female, and this happened when I was 25. So, in 2005, and into the year 2006. As my mom has always loved old houses and would buy them to fix them up, I've had several paranormal experiences, and so these types of things have stopped being scary. This story started when I met my very best friend in 2000, as my oldest daughter started Head Start. My bestie had a son who started at the same time. From the day we met, we essentially spent every day together. We were both stay-at-home moms, and so she was either always at my house or vice versa. Fast forward to the year 2005, and I now have 3 kids, 2 who were in school, and 1 who's at home, who spends his day with us while we take our walks, go swimming, run errands, eat in the little diner in our small town, etc. As she could not have any more kids, she loved my little one to pieces, and would play with him all the time. He would bring her toys and say play, and she would sit in front of his toy box and play while we visited. She spent a lot of time doing this. On July 18th of 2005, she drove her husband to work so she could run her errands, when she was struck by an 18-wheeled dump truck and killed. Her son survived, thank God. I don't remember a whole lot after this until probably September, when I finally came out of my depression. But I started to notice my son, who was still playing in the way that he used to. He would take toys to the couch, say play, and then proceed to walk back to the toy box and pull all of his toys out. He would sit in his high chair and make funny faces and then just giggle to himself. Then he would continue to do that talking babble that kids will do, and parents will talk back to them, even not understanding a word. I started asking, "Who are you playing with or talking to?" And he would say her name. Or at least his version of her name. To add some other points, after she passed, we started going through light bulbs like crazy. We couldn't keep a light bulb longer than a couple of weeks to a month. And I know most will say that's not evidence of anything, but I know that she was here. I had an extremely hard time with her death. For almost 8 months after her passing, at least twice a week, I would dream of going to the little diner, the one that we would often eat at almost daily when she was alive. And I would watch as she came over, sat down, and in my dream we would talk and catch up like nothing had ever happened. We would also spend hours on the phone to a point where it drove my husband crazy. After she passed, our phone would ring but no one would be on the other end, and the screen would just say private. In the end, I realized that she was hanging around wanting to make sure I was okay before moving on. So, I came to the conclusion that I had to let her go. It was so very hard, but I also did not want her to be stuck. I'm not an expert by any means, but you hear the stories of ghosts who don't move on and get stuck. So I sat on my bed and had a very emotional talk, letting her know that I would be okay. That it would be hard, but that I wanted her to be safe with God, or wherever her heaven may be. I truly feel that day she did at least leave us. Still, to this day, at least once or twice a year, I will have our diner dream, and we catch up. I like to think that she remembers me and is just dropping in to say hi. Like I said before, this was not scary but loving. Maybe one day I'll sit and write out some of the paranormal stories from my childhood, but until then, thank you, Raven, for keeping us all sane. Hey, Raven. I just wanted to say that I'm a huge fan of the podcast and love your voice. Thank you. Now on to the story. Just a bit of context before I get started. I live in a super tiny town in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, with a population of about 300 people. This doesn't really matter too much, but does kind of come in later on in the story. I'm not really too sure about ghosts and all things paranormal, but I do believe there are things that we will never understand in this life. So, in my town, there is a tiny community building called The Square. Supposedly, it has had some rumors of it being haunted, but I really didn't believe it until this story happened. The layout of this building is a bit confusing, so I'll try to explain it as best I can. Running through my town is a north and south running highway. Going south through the town, and on the right, is the building. There's a little back road that turns right and goes right in front of this building, and the building's main entrance. In front of the building, there is a tiny parking area where you can park your car, but it's not like a full parking lot. Me and 3 of my friends are sitting in this little parking area facing the highway at around 11:30 to 12 a.m., deciding what we should do next. As previously mentioned, our town is super tiny, so there's absolutely no one else around, especially not at this time of night. Anyways, we're sitting in my car and I have my driver's door open because it's hot and I want to stretch my legs out. All of a sudden, there is this loud scream that sounds like a kid screeching. I turn to my friend, we'll call her H, who's in the passenger seat of my car, and I ask her if she heard the screaming too. She said yes, so I turned back and asked my other friends if they heard the screaming too, and she said yes, that she heard it as well. So, a little freaked out, we're still just sitting there talking, when all of a sudden I hear these footsteps coming from behind my car, sounding like they're sprinting at me. I look over at my friend H, and she looks at me with a concerned look, so I look out my door. See no one, slam my door and drive away super fast. We look behind us and see no one, and the way we were facing on the road made it possible for there to be absolutely nowhere for someone to hide. Mind you, we don't drink or do any kind of drugs, so that rules that out. And in our town, no one but us was even awake at this time, let alone out and about. It was my first ever real paranormal encounter, if you even want to call it that, and it still freaks me out to this day. Hi, I'm Star. This story sounds like a nightmare, and I wish it was. For a bit of context, me and my boyfriend, we've been dating for 4-ish years now, live together and like to camp on weekends. Also, I have diagnosed schizophrenia, but I was on meds the whole time. My boyfriend does not have schizophrenia, and he experienced everything that I did too. Lately, due to work, we haven't been able to do much, but we finally got a gap to do so, and we jumped on the chance almost immediately. We decided to pick a campground in the mountains near us, about an hour and a half away, and an hour from any roads or people. Now, looking back, we should have seen some warning signs due to there being no one else booked there near the end of August. We didn't think anything of it, and just got our permits to camp there. The next day, we were all packed up and in the car. I had one of my stuffies/plushies with me. I take it with me whenever I can because it brings me comfort. I have trauma from a lot of stuff from when I was a kid, and this plushie somehow gives off a calming aura to me. Anyway, we got there and set up a few hours before nightfall, and everything was okay. We were going to stay there for 4 nights. We brought 2 sleeping bags and a 2-person tent, as well as some other camping gear. We got everything set up, and were making dessert when the first weird thing happened. One of our apple pie things just wasn't in the coals anymore. It's possible that we couldn't find the little ball of tinfoil that it was all wrapped up in, but it was right next to the other one, and that one was there. It's strange, but we both laughed it off and made another. We put out the fire and cleaned everything up so no bears would attack us or eat our food. It's happened before, and it's not pretty. We got into the tent and set up the sleeping bags. I got the plushie from the car. For context, it's a 4-foot, or 1.22 meters in non-freedom units, axolotl pillow/plushie. It was odd trying to sleep. I couldn't fall asleep even holding the plushie close. I couldn't get the feeling of being watched out of my mind. It wasn't my boyfriend because it was around 3 a.m. and he was asleep, holding me close to his chest. After another half hour, I realized that the calming aura that my plushie and boyfriend usually gave off was gone. Just vanished. This hasn't happened in the 4 years I've been dating my boyfriend and having the plushie. I woke up my boyfriend to tell him this, and he just looked at me confused. He never really understood what I meant about the calming feeling that I get from them. He just held me closer and hummed softly while I held onto the plushie tighter. Eventually, I did fall asleep. In the morning, when I got up, before my boyfriend, I was in the exact same position that I fell asleep in, but the plushie wasn't in my arms. In fact, it wasn't anywhere in the tent. It was right outside the tent. This was odd because I didn't wake up, and much less, I would never leave Axel, the plushie, yes, I gave him a name, outside like that. He could get stolen or taken by a wild animal. Everything was normal through the day and even during our hike. The only odd thing is that we didn't see any wildlife or hear any at all. Odd, but again, we just played it off. The next 2 nights and their days were normal as well. As normal as it could be. Again, though, there was no wildlife, only the birds circling the woods above us. The final night was off, to say the least. We both felt like we were being watched, and there was an unfriendly presence in those woods. We kept hearing a person, not an animal, but a person or something human-like, walking around, scratching the tent, snapping branches. Suddenly, it all stopped. The feeling of being watched went away, and that presence also went away. I was crying, and my boyfriend was shaking, scared. That was odd because it takes a lot to scare him. We both didn't sleep, and when we got up in the morning, we packed up as fast as we could and left. When we were packing up, there was a pile of snapped branches in piles of 10 to 20 sticks, and they were in a triangular pattern if you connected the dots. When we got home, that calming aura/presence of my boyfriend and plushie were instantly back, and a little overwhelming. I'm just glad that we were back home safe and unharmed. I'm sorry if this isn't clear or doesn't sound real, but it did happen, and we were both a little shaken from it almost a few weeks later. Hey Raven, great channel, one of the best. Thank you. During lockdown, I got involved in spirituality, dabbling in all sorts of traditions, and most I let go of afterward. One thing I kept going with was a regular outing in the woods near my home that I had previously never really bothered with. I never consider myself to be a nature person, other than looking at beautiful scenery pictures. I really didn't care for it. Bugs have always irritated me, and I didn't like being outside. That was until being cooped up inside for months on end came around, and then I had a change of heart. I got to get out of the house without having to deal with large amounts of people. I became more observant and learned what was normal for the forest, what kind of trees tended to grow where, even if I didn't know their names. I started to notice smaller differences. Some bark would only grow on some of the trees and not others. How there were occasionally stone circles or fallen trees. And I would wonder if it was the power of nature, who would place it there and why, and if it had any particular meaning. I walked down to the creek, nearly, watching the water flow by, and it was rare for me to be disturbed by anybody. You know how birds would go quiet, or you'd have the hair stand on the back of your neck? And that didn't happen. The shrubs near the waterline began to move against the wind, and I thought it was an animal. A deer came out and made its way toward the rest of the herd. I noticed a few deer nearby. They were grazing and would look in my direction. I didn't bother them, and they didn't bother me. I sat down on a rock, my usual spot that I would always spend time at. I closed my eyes and took a moment to relax before I started meditating. Judging by my watch after the event, what happened didn't take that long. I heard a weird, bellowing sound. I ignored it until I heard the same sound again. One thing that initially unsettled me was the strange sounds that animals would make. I opened my eyes when I heard the deer running through the forest, and looked around to see what had startled them. I couldn't help but let out a tiny giggle at my reaction, until I saw a lone deer walking through. There were some strange growths over its body, and it was moving weird. Like it was stiff, but somehow erratic, with sharp movements. I stood up and stared at it. It started walking in circles in the water, making that strange bellowing sound that scared me. I stepped backwards, unsure of who to report this to, and not knowing what to do, but I figured it was best to leave. A branch snapped whenever I stepped backward. I know, kind of cheesy, but that's what happened. The weird deer stopped still and looked in my direction. There was something about its vacant eyes that scared me. It didn't feel normal. I remember its sides were moving in and out as if it was breathing really heavily. Its head kind of flopped around while it did so. I don't know if I had been watching too many movies or TikToks, but it looked as though this thing was going to stand up on its hind legs. Finally, it started making several steps in my direction. I had actually heard about walkers taking the form of animals in order to get close to people. Maybe that's why the other deer ran away when it got close, because they knew what it was. Or maybe it could have been something else that was weirdly supernatural. I'm not afraid to say that I was too scared to stay there. I screamed, turned, and ran as fast as I could back home. What was relaxing for me had turned into an incredibly stressful experience, and I didn't want to ever relive that again. I haven't gone back to that creek since, or even that forest. I still do go for walks around my area, but not into the woods themselves. I was browsing YouTube Shorts, and a video of an infected deer came up. Some of them looked similar to what I saw. I heard that there was a fungus or a parasite that can affect deer like this. Or maybe it was something supernatural. I did report it to wildlife services, but I haven't heard anything back. If the deer was sick, then I hope that they could help it. Who knows? Maybe it could have been rabies or something. I don't know, Raven. Maybe your listeners can help me work out what that thing could have been. I recently started listening to your podcast and I'm hooked. I'm not sure whether this counts as a glitch in the Matrix, but I'm sure it was a weird experience. This was a couple of years ago at around 8:30 p.m. I was laying in bed falling asleep when I realized that I couldn't move. There was no sleep paralysis demon, as some people claim to see, just an overwhelming sense of fear. It stayed like this for a few minutes. Suddenly my ears started ringing, but with a really high-pitched noise. Not the usual ear-ringing people experience. The sound was almost painfully loud, and just as it reached the loudest point, I was awake. I was able to move again and sort of just lay there, confused. I felt weird, like I was still asleep. I closed my eyes and, well, I don't know how to explain it. There was this pressure in my head that I was able to increase if I really focused on it. With the pressure increasing, the deafening ringing started, and it kept getting louder in my head. Then there was silence. I couldn't move. I was back in sleep paralysis. However, I was still awake. I was fully awake and was completely aware of what was happening. It felt unreal that I was able to put my body into a temporary paralysis. The only downside was that I wasn't able to control when it ended. I laid there for a few minutes trying to understand what was happening, and poof, I was moving again. This happened multiple times, and it felt like it had been this weird sequence for hours. My mom then knocked on my door to check whether I was going to sleep. I explained what just happened, and she sort of just agreed that it was weird but didn't pay much attention to it. After she left, I couldn't do it anymore. I've tried multiple times since then, but to no avail. I should add that I lucid dream a lot. Many of my dreams are incredibly vivid, but I have no doubts that I was awake during this experience. With the lucid dreaming, it's more that halfway through the dream I'll realize that I'm dreaming, and suddenly my dream there will be a water bottle. If I pick up the water bottle and pour the water on my head, my dream version of me will fall onto the ground from a first-person perspective and I'll wake up. Pretty cool trick, but it was weird the first time it happened. Also, my mom told me that when I was younger, I had major night terrors. In the middle of the night, I would suddenly start screaming bloody murder and kicking around in fear. According to her, my eyes were wide open, but I wasn't awake. Again, I don't know if this is really a glitch, but it's more just my unusual experiences with sleep. I had a dear friend named Marie. She lay in dire straits in the oncology unit in a hospital she'd worked at a good many years as a doctor. I had planned to visit her after work and was going to take my friend Oscar from Paraguay to go with me to pray for her. He was very spiritual and faith-filled, and I had seen literally miracles from his mother's hands as well. His mother had died, so I latched onto him to bring help to her. An out-of-the-blue strangling tumor on her spine had given her less than 2 months to live, but yet she had 4 years. Every single doctor who'd read her chart opening diagnosis commented that after reading the first line, the chart should have ended in death, but it didn't, and was laboriously heavy with 4 years of unbelievable happenings. My friend Oscar talked to and then prayed for my friend. It was difficult because a man next door was mentally challenged and very ill, constantly shrieking and hollering. My friend Marie was so nervous and upset with it that she was nearly crazy. Oscar excused himself and took me with him next door to this man's room. His old mother was with him, and I would say he was in his 50s, and maybe her in her late 70s. "May I pray for your son?" Oscar asked kindly. "Oh yes, please," she responded. He did so all in either Guarani or Spanish. He was half German and half Guarani Indian. When he finished, the man was silent and seemed peaceful, and everyone in that unit sighed in great relief. But the next several days, when we both returned to check on Marie, the mother of the man in the next room sought Oscar out angrily. "What did you do to my son?" she demanded. He told her that he had prayed for him, and that's all. She kept insisting now he didn't speak at all, and the whole unit was blissfully quiet. It was crazy that she was acting angry with Oscar. We wanted to get out of the woman's wrath, and my friend was much improved, so we left then. And in my car, as I drove up Broadway towards the suburbs, we were both quiet, until I said, "What was that woman so mad about? Why was she crazy acting?" He said, "I prayed that if he was possessed with a demon to silence him in Jesus' name." He never wailed again the whole time Marie was there, nor cursed loudly, shrieked, or hollered loudly, and that's the truth. Hi Raven. Love your channel and decided to share one of my stories with you. This is a story that happened to me some time ago, but it still gives me the creeps. During my medical residency, I was transferred for a brief 2-week stint at a different hospital. Because of my short stay, I wasn't assigned my own locker. Instead, I was told to find one on the 2nd floor, a floor that was mostly deserted, used only for lockers, cleaning equipment, and sterilization rooms. The silence up there was unnerving, as if the floor had been forgotten by time. The only guest locker room was number 219, inside a long array of empty lockers stretched out before me. From the moment I stepped into that room, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that I was being watched. The sensation was so strong that it made my skin crawl. To make matters worse, the motion detection light had a mind of its own, flickering, often taking their sweet time to activate, as if deciding whether to leave me in the dark or not. I chose a locker further down the row, trying to ignore the unease that prickled at the back of my neck. For the first few days, nothing out of the ordinary happened, though the flickering light continued to give me the creeps. I told myself it was just an old building, probably in need of some maintenance. But then, on one of my last days there, something happened that I can't explain. I was in the locker room, already changed into my scrubs, but I lingered to read through the cases that I'd been assigned. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the building's systems. Suddenly, that silence was shattered by a loud, constant noise, a metallic clanging that echoed through the empty room. Startled, I looked up, my heart pounding and my veins tightening in my neck. The sound was coming from one of the lockers. Despite the fear twisting in my gut, I forced myself to approach it. As I opened the door, I saw a coat hanger inside violently banging against the metal walls of the locker. But there was no one there. I wasn't moving, and the air was still. No drafts, no vibrations, nothing that could explain the movement in that precise locker. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but there was none. The hanger continued to thrash before my eyes, and I just stood there, waiting for my fight-or-flight system to kick in. Finally, my brain chose flight. I quickly shut the locker and backed away, my heart still hammering in my chest. I left the room as fast as I could, not bothering to look back. I was so shaken that I never returned to get my clothes or shoes. I went home in my scrubs that night. Even now, I'm certain that that locker room was haunted. Something was in there with me 100%. If anyone has an explanation for what happened, I would love to read it. I have more stories from hospitals that me and my colleagues have experienced, and maybe I'll share them some other time. This was in summer of 1997. I was 7, and it was when two memorable things happened that year. I had a ghost speak to me from the stairs to my bedroom, and Princess Diana passed away in Paris, France that summer. The stairs went straight up to 2 bedrooms. My sister's was on the right, and mine was on the left. My parents, sister, and I were going to go out for dinner. My mom gave me the task to hurry my older sister up from upstairs. I said sure, excited to go out with my family to dinner as it was a rare occurrence. My mom left to wait in the car with Dad. I went to the washroom, and when I came out, I was at the bottom of the stairs looking up. The washroom was right beside the bottom of the stairs. I smiled big and yelled so Carrie could hear me. "Mom and Dad want to leave, Carrie. They started the car, let's go." I listened very briefly. Nothing. "Hey, Carrie, let's go." Still nothing. Is she deaf or just listening to music? For some reason, I didn't want to go upstairs to check on her. "Carrie!" I said it in a silly but come on, hurry up kind of way. Still nothing. I sensed that someone was up there and was confused as to why my sister was ignoring me. "Hey, Carrie!" And then finally I heard a whisper from upstairs. "Yes?" I paused because it didn't sound like my sister, but more masculine. I thought maybe I heard my sister wrong and continued on my happy-go-lucky way. "Mom and Dad want to leave now, Carrie. Let's go." My mom was suddenly behind me. "What are you doing, Krista?" I jumped, surprised to find my mom there. "I'm getting Carrie down as you asked from upstairs." Mom responded. "Carrie's with us in the car. She's waiting for you." I was confused. I told Mom I thought she was up there, but I didn't tell anyone that something spoke back to me. I definitely heard a yes, and it sounded like it came from the top of the stairs. I didn't see anything or anyone, but something did respond to me from the top of the stairs. Luckily, being a kid, I totally forgot about it and went up to my room after supper like normal. Later, when we moved from that house, I later remembered the experience. I've written in once before recently, but was just reminded of an event that occurred a few years ago. I don't dream often, but when I do, the dreams are usually very vivid. A couple of years ago, I went through a period where I had dreams every night for about 2 weeks. The dreams were fairly normal, nothing out of the ordinary, except that the same woman appeared in every dream. She appeared to be in her mid-50s with blonde hair. She did not play a part in the dreams, but could just be seen standing off to the side or in the background, watching what was happening. I live in an apartment complex, and after a few weeks of the dreams, a new neighbor was moving into the next building, right near my assigned parking spot. I was getting out of my car as the new neighbor walked out of her apartment, and it was the woman who had been appearing in my dreams. She dead stopped and just stood there staring at me, just like in the dreams. I was kind of freaked out and hurriedly walked to my apartment. I never saw her again, and about a week later, somebody else was moving into that apartment, which had apparently still been vacant. She never appeared in my dreams again, nor did I ever see her again in real life. I have no idea who or what she was, and if anyone has any thoughts, I would love to hear them. Hi, it's me again, the 13-year-old Finnish boy. In this story, you will hear 3 sightings of my dead grandmother. 1. We were at my family's cottage in the north. I had just come out from the sauna. When I got inside, I ate and went to bed, and from my bed you can see the door. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to an old woman's voice saying, "Hello, I came back." I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. I was in a panic. So that's when I opened my eyes and saw my grandma. I was in absolute shock. After I blinked, she disappeared. 2. I was at home all by myself when I heard the doorbell. As I went to open the door, I looked at a mirror, and as I did, I saw my grandmother standing behind me. I got scared and called my mom. She was scared and called my dad, and then my dad told me not to worry. So, I didn't. And 3, this one happened yesterday. I was at school walking through the hallways when I saw my grandmother roaming around the cafeteria. I told my friend to look, but as he turned around, she disappeared. Man, I hate when ghosts and spirits disappear. But anyways, thank you for reading. I love your podcast, and hopefully you and everybody listening has a great day. In the early 1990s, I was known as the weird kid at school. I often wore X-Files shirts and embraced all sorts of quirky interests that set me apart from my peers. During a science class, we were studying rats, and our teacher announced that they would need a new home for one of them since the term was ending. Everyone turned to look at me, knowing I would be the one to volunteer. True to form, I eagerly raised my hand. I didn't realize at the time that Luna, the rat, was pregnant. When I brought her home, I set up a cozy corner in her cage with plenty of bedding and toys. Over the weekend, Luna adjusted to her new environment, and I eagerly watched as she gave birth to a litter of tiny, squeaking babies. They were so small and delicate, like little pink jelly beans. On each day, I marveled at their growth, and among them was a particularly special baby, an albino rat with pure white fur and striking red eyes. I named him Snow. Snow was the only albino in the litter, and his unique appearance made him stand out even more. I was captivated by him, and spent hours just watching him and the others. A few days later, my excitement turned to panic. I noticed that Snow had somehow escaped from the cage. My heart raced as I searched everywhere, under furniture, behind curtains, and through every nook and cranny of the house. I was a whirlwind of anxiety, flipping over cushions into dark corners, and even checking behind the appliances. My search turned into a frantic and desperate quest. I even moved the entire furniture in my room, hoping Snow might have found a hiding spot, as the thought of losing Snow was unbearable. In my desperation, I decided to involve Luna. I gently held her, looking into her small, beady eyes. With tears streaming down my face, I focused all of my energy on asking her for help. Despite my odd reputation and my willingness to try anything, no matter how strange it seemed, I was ready to give anything a shot, even telepathic communication. To my astonishment, a voice echoed in my mind, clear and calm. The voice instructed, "Go to your parents' room and look under a box at the bottom of their wardrobe cupboard. You'll find my baby." I followed the instructions immediately, my heart pounding with hope and fear. I dashed to my parents' room and threw open the wardrobe cupboard. I spotted the box exactly as described and opened it with trembling hands. When I looked inside, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was Snow, the tiny albino rat with red eyes, nestled safely inside. I was overwhelmed with relief and joy. Tears flowed freely as I gently picked up Snow and cradled him in my hands. To this day, I am still amazed by how I was able to hear Luna's voice in my mind. It was a one-time experience that I've never been able to replicate, despite my efforts to communicate with animals. This extraordinary moment remains a cherished memory, a mysterious and heartwarming reminder of special connections that we can have with the animals that we love. I grew up in what I believe to be a haunted house. When I was a child, I would often wake up in the night to see shadow people and other things walking around in my bedroom. These things would terrify me to the point that when I would scream, nothing would come out at first. My mother would tell me that I was dreaming. I would ask her how I was dreaming when I'm wide awake. I saw a ghost that looked like a kid wearing a sheet over their head. The sheet was so white that it glowed. I woke up to a miniature person walking on the edge of my bed. I once saw a giant 7-foot-tall man in my room walking straight towards me. He stopped at the edge of my bed and just stared at me, and I had scratches on my neck. My mother still kept saying that I was dreaming, and that I had scratched myself. I pointed out to her that I was wide awake and my hands were on top of my pillows, so I couldn't have scratched myself. I also saw a woman rocking in a rocking chair. Again, my mother said that I was dreaming. The next day, I overheard her talking on the phone, saying that she saw the woman in the rocking chair too. I immediately said loud and clear that I wasn't dreaming, because other people can't see your dreams. My sister walked by my room one night and swore that she saw a pirate ship on my wall. Also, my dog avoided my room like it was the bubonic plague. I do have more stories about other rooms in the house, but I'll get into that at another time. I was a park ranger in Frederick, Maryland, dutifully patrolling the state park one fateful night. The air was crisp and the forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. As I made my rounds, I stumbled upon a heart-wrenching sight. A black bear, grievously injured, likely struck by an elk. The bear was in agony, its labored breaths echoing through the stillness. With a heavy heart, I knew what had to be done. I raised my gun and with a single shot, ended its suffering. I radioed in the incident, my voice trembling slightly as I relayed the details. Suddenly, a deep guttural howl pierced the night, sending shivers down my spine. It was close, no more than 100 feet away. My eyes scanned the darkness and then I saw it. A hulking figure moving towards the dead bear. As it came into view, my blood ran cold. This creature stood upright, towering at least 6 to 7 feet tall. Its body was a grotesque blend of a wolf's head and the muscular frame of a bodybuilder, covered in jet black fur. Its eyes were a menacing red and I was paralyzed with fear, my gun useless in my now trembling hands. The beast approached the bear's carcass and began to devour it with a ferocity that was both horrifying and mesmerizing. I estimated that the bear would be completely consumed within 2 hours at the rate it was going. Slowly, I regained my composure and began to back away, inching towards my golf cart. Just as I thought I was safe, something heavy struck the seat beside me. The bear's head. I started the cart and sped away, the creature howling echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I was far from the park with my heart pounding in my chest. The next morning I handed in my resignation. As I write this, I can't help but wonder why the creature threw the head at me. Was it some kind of warning? A message that I was lucky the bear was there, or I would have been its next meal? I now believe that we have an alpha male werewolf lurking in the woods of Maryland. I was always a skeptic of cryptids, but that night changed everything. Hey Raven, I love listening to all your stories. This is my first time submitting. A few years ago, my husband and I went to a luxurious hotel in Florida. We arrived Friday afternoon and got settled in. A few minutes later, we decided to take a trip around the city, and as we were leaving, we noticed that the hallways and the big mirrors were just like the ones in the movie The Shining. This was a little funny to us. We did everything we were going to do in the city and came back to the room. We then took showers and went to bed. My husband likes to get up early in the mornings to run at every city we stay in to see what's around. This morning he was up around 7 a.m. I ended up waking up as well as I heard a bunch of construction from upstairs, right above us. It sounded like hammering, drilling, the whole 9 yards. I was upset because I came here to rest, not to be woken that early from construction. I called downstairs and asked why there was construction at 7 o'clock in the morning, when people were trying to sleep. The front desk told me they were going to check it out. An hour and a half later, when my husband came back from his run, I was still awake and upset because the noise was still happening. I told my husband that I called downstairs, and he told me that when he came in, he asked about the noise to the front desk again, and they told him that there was no construction anywhere in the building, but that they were getting several phone calls about the noise. This kind of scared the crap out of me, but it's a beautiful hotel and we continued to stay there when we traveled to the city. After that, we haven't had any type of other mysterious sounds or anything. So, is it haunted? Hello, Raven. I love your content and your channel. Here is my story about, well, something. Me, my dad, and my brother named Jack were camping, and we went there and got greeted by an old guy who was in his 70s or 80s, and he told us that he hid toys and marbles by a creek that runs down the campsite. My brother got super excited about this because, at the time, we were little kids. I really didn't care all too much, but when he told us, it was between 9 p.m. and 12 a.m., when it would be pitch black and creepy. My dad asked if he could set it at an earlier time, and the old guy flipped out. He gave us a card and just ran away. When me and my dad set up the tent, it was like 7 p.m., and Jack wondered if we could go check out the toy scavenger hunt. So we did. The old guy was in an old lawn chair, just smiling at everyone, finding tiny army figures and shiny rocks. Jack ran and I chased him, and he found a Spider-Man action figure. My dad put 2 big thumbs up, and we ran around trying to find toys. 2 hours pass, and we're cooking s'mores, and we hear an animal, and we then found a big elk. It looked cool until it walked toward us. My dad told us to go in the tent, but the elk just wanted some food. We decided to call it quits for the night and go to sleep. I then woke up to crunching outside of our tent, so I thought it was just the elk that we saw earlier, but no. It was the old man walking around at least midnight. I woke up my dad and he got protection ready while I kept my brother quiet. He ended up disappearing that night and went missing. As I get older, I remind myself of how stupid that was. Going to that old man's party? If it was in a house, like a house party, it would be normal. Like an old man just spreading joy around to his neighbors. But in the middle of the woods with no cell service, it was just crazy. This is the reason why our former roommate left our house in such a hurry. The story isn't about me, but a friend of mine. For the sake of the story, we will call her JD. She's a roommate of ours, and this story happens to her during her time at a nightclub. She was busy dancing when a man walked up to her and asked her if she wanted to dance with him, but she kindly rejected his gesture. She continued dancing. The song soon ended, and she was just getting ready to leave when suddenly she felt a hard shove from behind. She fell to the ground and stared at the source of the push. It didn't take her long to realize that the man that offered to dance with her had angrily shoved her over. She was terrified, but luckily a couple of people came to her rescue. She pointed at the guy who had pushed her, and those kind people shoved him over in return, and then beat the living crap out of him. Needless to say, she had serious trauma after that incident. Hi, I'm not sure where this story goes, but feel free to edit or pad it out. When I was a teenager, I was in my bedroom and my mom shouted through if I wanted dinner. I had only gotten home from school, so I didn't know what there was in the house to eat. I decided to go and chat with her to see. As I left my bedroom, I had to pass the kitchen to get into the living room. As I did this, I saw my mom bent over the top of the cooker, with her hands on either side, wearing something I had never seen before. It was like a 50s style baby blue twin set, with the skirt and jackets to match. I already thought that was weird, as this was the 90s. So, while I'm thinking this, my mom turns her head to me from over the cooker and gives me the creepiest smile. It gave me goosebumps all over. I continued into the living room where my mom was sitting in a chair in a red jumper and black trousers. She saw my face and asked me what was wrong. I explained everything that just happened, and my mom very nonchalantly said, "Oh, you saw Francis." Never having heard this name before, she explained to me that she had a twin sister who had died at birth in 1950, and she was given the name Francis, which was then given to my mom as a middle name. I never saw Francis again, and after that smile, I never wanted to.